Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. In today's story, we've got a catering gig from hell, a micromanaging boss who's one broken bowl away from a meltdown, and one glorious act of chaotic compliance that sent him over the edge. Buckle up, because this petty payback is as satisfying as the smash it caused. Petty payback, the $10 that shattered my boss's sanity. A few years ago, I worked for a catering company as a driver. The job meant I was in charge of packing, transporting, setting up, working the event, packing up again, and coming back. Basically everything but cooking the food. You had to count out your dishes and silverware and everything, wrap them in bundles with plastic wrap, box them and throw them in the truck. It was a pretty big operation, so there were a dozen different orders happening at any given time. Sometimes mistakes would happen, a dish broken or hopefully not, food dropped. Things happen. The job would get hectic, and it was made worse by the owner who would micromanage everything with a sweaty red face, probably constantly on the verge of an aneurysm from being so uptight. The man was just angry and abrasive. One day, after hearing another dish break, he exclaimed that he would start charging employees for dishes broken. So guess who had the misfortune of breaking a dish the very next day? Me, of course. I was bundling up stacks of bowls, and one of them got away. It hit the floor, and I cringed. I hear, "Hey!" And the boss man comes around the corner saying, "Those bowls are $5 a piece. You gonna pay me now, or am I taking it out of your check?" I tried to apologize, thinking that he was just trying to scare me into groveling, but he was serious. I had no idea what he was asking was not legal, but I just decided to go with it. I'd gone to the store for smokes before work and paid them with the only 20 I had, so I knew there was a 10 in my wallet. I picked up another bowl and tossed it up in the air and let it come down directly into the remains of the first one, smashing into pieces. His face got so red and he started to yell about it, while I got my wallet and handed him the 10 and went back to work. He was so mad about it, but I played dumb and said I only had the 10 and couldn't think of what else to do. He cussed loudly and went somewhere else to fume. He made the rest of my employment there living hell, and I started a new job shortly thereafter. But it was so nice to see him lose his mind about that. Okay, but if you really said, "If I'm paying for it, I own it now," and made performance art out of a broken bowl, that man tried to squeeze you for $5 and you gave him a $10 live-action temper tantrum trigger instead. Legendary. And our second story. I fought the ice wall and I won $4 and my dignity. Some background information. I was a recent engineering graduate working full-time, making pretty good money. I decided I wanted to propose to my girlfriend and needed that good diamond ring money, so I randomly took a job as a waiter at a local diner and would work afternoons, nights, and weekends. Making pretty crap money, but I'm a whore for money, so I didn't care. If you've ever worked at a job you don't need, it really is eye-opening. But that's another story. So as I'm sure most of you know, waiters and waitresses have side work to do at the end of their shift, which to me seems pretty bullcrap, but whatever. The state I lived in paid $2 an hour for servers on top of whatever tips they take home, so this side work is near slave labor, in my opinion, because it's a non-tipped labor. On my second week at the job, my end-of-shift side work was to scrape down the ice cream freezer frost buildup. When freezers run for a long time, condensation forms and then freezes on the inside of the freezer walls. I'd worked at an ice cream shop as a teenager, so I was very familiar with ice cream freezers. Normally, you just let the freezer warm up and melt the frost off, but these owners didn't do it that way. Instead, I was encouraged to pay a busboy $5 for him to scrape the frost. Now, in my mind, that just sounds like I'm paying an employee to do work at a restaurant I don't own nor profit from. So I said, no, I'll do it myself. The manager didn't like that at all, but she couldn't really do anything about it. My tips were already in my pocket, and she couldn't force me to give my money away. I opened up the freezer and see that there are about 3 inches or more of frost on the walls. I know from experience this is several years of frost buildup. The walls haven't been frost-free in years, so I asked the manager how much frost she wants me to remove, warning her that it might take a while to scrape them down to bare metal. She snidely said that the busboys remove every scrap of frost every week. Bull crap. And that's what's expected from me. Okay, you asked for it. Over the next 2 hours, I scraped, sweated, grunted, and struggled with this frost. It was a chest freezer, so I was bent over head inside the freezer. The ice cream had to be moved out of the way, so it all melted and dropped onto the carpet. The freezer was in the dining area, so guests were treated to awful noises and my butt in the air. I sweat like a maniac and probably smelled awful. Everyone in the whole restaurant could hear this cacophony. Manager kept coming back to heckle me and ask, "You gonna give up? Come on, just pay the busboy. It's late and I know you have to work in the morning." Fellow servers, mostly mid-40s people, were actively rooting against me. My arms were wrecked for weeks after this. It was 1 in the morning, 24-hour diner, and I'd been on my feet at 2 jobs for like 18 hours. But I was earning money, and $2 an hour was enough to keep my resolve ironclad. Plus, I was so PO'd at the insistence that I pay her employees for her. After 2 hours and 6 gallons of melted ice cream, the manager gave up and sent me home. Only 1/3 of the frost was gone, and I was $4 richer. Tip your servers. They probably put up with so much bullcrap. You work hard, and at the end of the day have to pay someone else 2.5 hours worth of your pay to wipe your employer's butt? No thank you. And our next story. Entitled man screams, "I'm a cab," then kicks my car when I don't give him a ride. This was years ago. I was 21 and had just gotten my driver's license not long before. I had an old Nissan hatchback, and I used to get pulled over by cops a lot because it was the model that only old folks or minicabs were using, cheap and reliable, etc. That's a different story, though. This one's about when I had worked a 12-hour shift and my sister called asking if I could pick her up on my way home from her work's Christmas party. She was crying. Her boss had chosen the party to announce that he was closing the business unless the staff was willing to move to a new town 90 minutes away. I pulled up, feeling rather self-conscious about my 10-year-old car, surrounded by a golf club full of Mercs and Audis. I was about to get out and find my sister, who can be a bit of a minor Karen at times, when someone tried to open the passenger door. This car was old, with no central locking, so only my door was unlocked. Entitled old guy, EOG, yelled at me to let him in because he was too drunk to drive. I told him I wasn't a taxi. He yelled back that I was, and I had to walk him around the car to show him that there was no Hackney carriage plate, no CB radio, no taxi sign on the roof. EOG went nuts, insisting I should drive him home for free. I just walked inside, found my sister while he ranted to everyone in the parking lot. He kicked my car and yelled on his way out. When I came back out, I unlocked the door for my sister, and he went nuclear. In the end, I decided to shout back. Imagine a 7-foot-tall, heavy-built guy who's actually very shy losing it. I do remember the final exchange because we joke about it now. EOG, you said you weren't a cab. Why are you letting her in the car? Me, I'm not a cabbie. I'm picking up my sister who just got fired at her work Christmas party. Go get a coffee and rein your neck in. He wasn't the first or the last to think I was a mini cab driver, but he was my first ever Karen/Ken. Nothing like being poor-shamed and mistaken for a taxi driver by a drunk grandpa in the parking lot of a golf club. I mean, the logic this guy used, "You're not a cab? Then why is there a passenger in your car?" is crazy. And our last story. How a neighbor's backhoe cost them $75,000. The house I grew up in sat on the side of a hill with an incredible view of the valley below. It was beautiful, but it came with its own set of challenges, especially when it came to utilities. The most troublesome of these was sewage. The city had come up with a solution, though, that involved something they called a shared line. Essentially, a single large pipe ran through the backyards of all the homes on the hill just below the house's basements. Effluent would flow from each home into the shared pipe, which would then carry everything down the hill into the city's sewer line by the lowest house. We moved in at the highest point possible, just within the limits for the shared sewer line. The neighborhood was part of a planned community with an HOA, which took care of maintenance for the shared sewer system. But a few years later, a neighbor purchased a lot just beyond the crest of the hill where no one had previously been able to build and decided to tap into our system. However, they weren't part of the original HOA-managed community, nor did they get approval from the HOA to connect to the shared line. This became the beginning of years of tension and harassment. Since their connection was lower than ours, the sewage had trouble flowing. The flow would stop or even back up into their basement bathroom and shower. They immediately blamed us, accusing us of diverting our sewage into their line because apparently we were secretly plumbing wizards with the ability to reroute effluent. The reason the area where they built had been left undeveloped initially was because the soil there was unstable, something hydrology related, or so my dad used to explain. Over time, the house on the lower section of the hill began sliding down a few inches here and there, exacerbating the situation, but the neighbors had connections in the local code enforcement agency, so instead of the house being condemned, they just kept propping it up and rehooking the utilities whenever it shifted. The further down the house slid, the steeper the negative incline became for their sewer connection, which made the clogs and backups much worse. Eventually, it got so bad that their sewer barely functioned. Some days it was completely clogged, and it wasn't long before they started blaming us for their troubles. Every time they flushed a toilet, they'd call us up, angry that raw sewage was coming back up into their downstairs shower. They called a plumber, who told them that they needed to redo their section of the shared line entirely. The solution? Tear down our 2-story masonry wall so they could get a backhoe onto our property and dig out the pipes. Naturally, we were not thrilled about this. We told them that they were not coming onto our property with construction equipment, especially a massive backhoe. If they needed to dig, they could hire manual laborers. But instead of agreeing, they hired a team of lawyers who sent us a flurry of legal paperwork. They claimed that we were in violation of state law, which provided an implied easement allowing neighbors to access each other's property for maintenance of shared utilities. This meant, according to them, that we had no choice but to let them tear down our wall and destroy our property to fix their plumbing. Our lawyers advised us that we could win the case, but it would be incredibly expensive. The alternative was letting them do what they wanted. Either way, we were going to be stuck with a huge cost, but there was one piece of advice our lawyer gave that stuck. The 20-year-old masonry wall we had was not in the greatest shape anyway. In the end, it could be worth more for us to let them fix their issue and charge them for the damages they caused. A few months later, we decided to present them with a bill that included the full cost of rebuilding the wall, installing new stairs, replacing our wrought iron fence, resodding the yard, replacing ornamental plants and shrubs, and even some minor repairs to our sewer system, which they had inadvertently damaged when working on their own pipes. The total came to a whopping $75,000. Now, they could have easily hired manual labor to dig out the pipe, but instead they chose to use a giant caterpillar machine. We knew that they could have avoided all this by taking the cheaper route, but they wanted to use heavy machinery, so we made sure they paid for it. When they balked at the bill, we pulled out a copy of the legal documents they'd sent us. In the fine print, it stated that the person using the easement for repairs was 100% responsible for any damages caused. After that, they could no longer argue. They still hesitated, but we filed a lien on their property. It stayed there until they tried to sell, and when they went to the bank to secure a mortgage, they were informed that they needed to pay the lien before they could proceed. They paid the full amount plus interest before they could sell the house. To this day, I'm not sure if they fully understood how they'd been outplayed, but they definitely learned the lesson the hard way. Don't mess with people who know the law and are willing to fight back when it matters most. Oh, damn. That was an absolutely perfectly executed long game. This is one of those rare situations where every petty little inconvenience you had to suffer was fully and satisfyingly avenged, with interest, literally. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.